Beneath the tentative warmth of an early spring dawn at Granite Animal Sanctuary, cradled by the stark majesty of the Rocky Mountains, a quiet morning shatters into a scene of awe and urgency. The air carries the sharp chill of lingering snowmelt, mingling with the faint warmth of a sun breaking through the high peaks. Rescued German Shepherd Mara, once a captive in despair, now faces the miracle of motherhood as she gives birth to her litter of five. As the first four puppies arrived healthy and strong, the fifth brought an unforeseen twist that no one could have predicted. A routine event turns extraordinary when the attending veterinarian witnesses a final birth that defies all expectations. A sight so breathtakingly fragile, it sees the entire team in a hush of awe-stricken silence, hearts pounding with a mix of dread and wonder. What emerged was not merely life, it was a fragile, trembling miracle, a testament that etched itself into their souls, forever reshaping their reverence for nature's unyielding spirit. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. A veil of morning mist clung low over Granite Animal Sanctuary, nestled in the shadowed embrace of the towering Rocky Mountains in Colorado. It was early April, and the landscape was stirring from its winter slumber. Patches of early columbines and golden banner flecked the rocky meadows with hints of purple and yellow, while the thin, pine-scented mountain air carried the lively trills of Steller's jays stirring from their winter quiet. This 150-acre sanctuary had been established 13 years ago by James Bradley, a 60-year-old former military dog trainer who poured his pension into creating a safe refuge for abandoned animals. Among the many creatures that called Granite home was Mara, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a sleek black and tan coat and warm brown eyes full of expression. Unlike most of the sanctuary's residents, Mara hadn't been born wild. She had been rescued 2 years earlier from an illegal breeding operation in New Mexico, where she had been kept in deplorable conditions, malnourished and trembling with fear of humans. When authorities raided the facility, they found Mara huddled in a cramped, rusty crate, barely large enough for her to shift her weight. Dr. Mike Lawson, the 55-year-old veterinarian who oversaw the medical care of all animals at Granite, remembered the day Mara arrived as if it were yesterday. Her coat had been dull and patchy, her eyes clouded with distrust. It had taken months of patient rehabilitation, proper nutrition, and gentle handling before she began to regain her natural confidence and instincts. Though she would never be released into the wild, her fear of vast open spaces and lack of survival skills made that impossible. She had gradually come to see the sanctuary's spacious, rugged enclosure as her domain. "She's come so far," Mike often remarked to his colleagues. 35-year-old animal specialist Wyatt Cole, a former park Cody, with a weathered look that masked his tender heart, worked alongside him. Together, they had spent countless hours observing Mara's progress, documenting her recovery, and ensuring her environment offered ample stimulation. 6 months ago, the sanctuary had taken in another rescued German shepherd, a young male named Cody, who had been found abandoned but healthy near a ranch in Wyoming. After a careful introduction period, Mara and Cody had formed a tentative bond. Their initial caution gave way to mutual grooming and shared resting spots atop the rocky outcrops. The staff had noticed the pair's growing closeness during the winter months, but hadn't anticipated a pregnancy. German shepherds typically mate in late winter or early spring, with puppies arriving about 2 months later. By their calculations, if Mara was pregnant, she shouldn't deliver until late April or early May. Yet on this misty April morning, a couple of weeks ahead of schedule, something was clearly amiss. Wyatt arrived at the sanctuary shortly after dawn for his usual rounds, a thermos of black coffee in hand. As he approached Mara's enclosure, he immediately noticed her unusual behavior. Instead of resting on her favorite rocky ledge or patrolling the edges of her enclosure, she was pacing restlessly in the back corner of the habitat, pawing at the soft bedding material in the kennel the staff had installed months earlier. "Hey there, Mara," Wyatt called softly, using the nickname the staff had given her. "What's going on, girl?" Mara ignored him, continuing her agitated pacing. Every few minutes, she would stop, lower herself to the ground, and let out a soft, anxious whimper, less a bark, more a high-pitched plea that tugged at the heart. Concerned, Wyatt pulled out his phone and called Mike. "I think you'd better come in early," he said when the veterinarian answered. "Something's up with Mara. She's showing signs of distress, and I'm wondering if she might be going into labor." "Labor?" Mike sounded surprised. "That can't be right. We estimated she wouldn't be due for at least another 6 weeks." "I know, but she's nesting. Her vocalization is different, and she's switching between pacing and dropping into what looks like a birthing stance." There was a brief pause. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Mike replied. "In the meantime, alert the rest of the staff. If she is in labor, we need to be prepared, especially since it's premature." By the time Mike arrived, wearing a rumpled flannel shirt and faded jeans, his graying hair still damp from a hasty shower, Wyatt had already set up a makeshift monitoring station near Mara's enclosure. The sanctuary cameras that normally recorded her movements had been repositioned to focus on the kennel. Basic medical supplies were laid out on a folding table. "Any changes?" Mike asked, accepting a cup of coffee from Sarah Mills, the sanctuary's 29-year-old education coordinator, who had arrived shortly after Wyatt's call. Her contractions seemed to be getting stronger and more frequent. Sarah replied, pushing her thick-frame glasses up her nose. "I've been timing them. About 4 minutes apart now." Mike nodded grimly. Premature labor in rescued German Shepherds isn't uncommon, especially for first-time mothers who've endured trauma. "Let's hope the puppies are developed enough to survive." The team watched anxiously as Mara continued her laborious preparation, pawing frantically at the bedding material, circling restlessly, and occasionally letting out heart-wrenching whines that carried through the crisp mountain air. Though they were all experienced animal care professionals, there was something deeply moving about witnessing Mara struggle, perhaps because they knew her history, the neglect she had suffered, and the remarkable resilience she had shown in her recovery. "Should we intervene?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice tight with concern. Mike shook his head. "Not unless absolutely necessary. Dogs, even those in sanctuaries, usually handle birth without human help. Our presence might stress her more and complicate things. For now, we observe and stay ready for any emergency." As the morning wore on, more staff members arrived, drawn by text messages about the unexpected development. By 9:30 a.m., a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance from the enclosure, their faces etched with concern and anticipation. At precisely 10:20 a.m., Mara gave a final, powerful push, and the first puppy emerged, a tiny, wet bundle of dark fur no larger than a human palm. The staff collectively held their breath as Mara carefully cleaned the newborn, licking away the birth membrane and coaxing its first breaths. After what seemed like an eternity, the puppy let out a faint whimper, and a wave of relief washed over the onlookers. "Good girl, Mara," Wyatt murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're doing great." Over the next hour, 3 more puppies were born, each following the same pattern. Mara's intense labor, the emergence of a small damp form, and her immediate thorough cleaning. By early afternoon, 4 tiny German Shepherd puppies nestled against their mother's warm body, their wet fur gradually drying into the characteristic black and tan markings of their breed. 4 healthy puppies. That's a solid litter for a German Shepherd, Mike observed, making notes on his tablet. She seems to be handling motherhood well, considering her background. But Mara wasn't finished. As the afternoon shadows stretched across the rocky terrain, her restlessness returned, and it became clear that another puppy was on the way. This labor seemed different, though. More prolonged and difficult. Mara panted heavily, her sides heaving with exertion, as she struggled to deliver the final member of her litter. "Something's wrong," Mike said, his experienced eye catching the subtle signs of distress. "This one's taking too long." After 30 minutes of increasingly labored pushing, the 5th puppy finally emerged. A fragile bundle, barely half a pound, far smaller than its siblings. Even from their observation position, the staff could see that this one was different. It was noticeably smaller than its siblings, its body almost translucent in fragility. Most concerning of all, it wasn't moving. "We need to intervene," Mike decided, his professional demeanor giving way to urgency. "That puppy needs help now." The delicate operation of separating a newborn from its mother was fraught with risk. In their instincts, mother German shepherds are fiercely protective of their young, and even a hand-raised dog like Mara might react defensively to perceived threats to her puppies. But there was no choice. The tiny life hanging in the balance demanded action. Wyatt, who had the strongest rapport with Mara, volunteered to enter the enclosure. Moving with deliberate slowness, he approached the kennel, speaking in a low, soothing voice. "It's okay, Mara. We're here to help. You're doing so well, girl." To everyone's amazement, Mara didn't growl or try to guard her puppies. Instead, she watched Wyatt with what almost seemed like recognition, her warm brown eyes softening as she wagged her tail faintly, a sign of trust in canine body language. When he reached toward the motionless fifth puppy, she shifted slightly, as if making room for his hands. "I don't believe it," Sarah whispered. "She's letting him help." With infinite care, Wyatt lifted the tiny puppy, cradling it against his chest as he backed out of the enclosure. Mike was waiting at the door, medical bag already open. "Get it to the clinic immediately," he instructed. "Oxygen, warming pad, the works. I'll be right behind you." As Wyatt hurried toward the sanctuary's small veterinary clinic, Mike turned to Sarah. "Keep watching Mara and the other puppies. If she seems distressed about the missing one, let me know right away. We may need to return it regardless of its condition." In the clinic, a flurry of activity surrounded the tiny puppy. Mike's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he massaged its limp body, administered gentle oxygen, and placed it on a warming pad. "Come on, little fighter," he murmured as he worked. "Your mama and siblings are waiting for you." For several heart-stopping moments, there was no response. Then, just as hope began to fade, the puppy gave a weak, almost imperceptible twitch. A moment later, its tiny mouth opened in a faint whimper, and its chest began to rise and fall in shallow breaths. "We've got signs of life," Mike announced, unable to keep the elation from his voice. "But we're not out of the woods yet." A closer examination revealed why the puppy had struggled so much during birth and why it was having difficulty now. Unlike its healthy siblings, this one had a condition known as swimmer puppy syndrome. Its legs splayed out like it was swimming, too weak to stand or move effectively. "It's a developmental issue," Mike explained to Wyatt, who hovered anxiously nearby. "Not uncommon in large breeds like German shepherds, especially with premature births. Without help, this little one wouldn't survive." "But here?" Wyatt asked, his eyes fixed on the tiny form that now squirmed feebly on the warming pad. Mike's expression was guarded. "Here, with intensive care, tube feeding, and physical therapy to strengthen its legs. Maybe. It's going to be a long road, though." "What about Mara? Won't separating the puppy cause her distress?" "That's our other challenge. Ideally, we'd want this little one to bond with its mother and siblings, but it can't reach her to nurse or keep up with the others, and we can't risk it failing to thrive." The solution they devised was a compromise, a specially designed incubator placed just outside Mara's enclosure, positioned so that mother and child could see and smell each other, while the staff provided the fragile puppy with the care it needed. Sarah, who had been monitoring Mara's behavior, reported that the mother German shepherd had seemed momentarily puzzled by the missing puppy, but had quickly returned her attention to the four healthy ones demanding her care. Still, she occasionally glanced toward the exit where Wyatt had taken the fifth puppy, her ears perked forward in what might have been concern. The days that followed established a new rhythm at Granite Animal Sanctuary. The staff organized around-the-clock shifts to care for the fragile fifth puppy, whom they named River after the quaking river trees that dotted the sanctuary. Trees known for their resilience despite appearing delicate. Tube feeding a newborn puppy required skill, patience, and a gentle touch. The specialized formula, designed to mimic a German shepherd's milk, had to be administered every 2 hours, day and night. River's weight was meticulously documented. Each gram gained celebrated as a victory. The incubator, kept at precisely the right temperature and humidity, became the center of attention, with staff members stopping by throughout the day to check on the little fighter's progress. James Bradley, the sanctuary's 60-year-old founder, took a particular interest in River's case. Though his years of military service had left him with a stiff knee, making hands-on care challenging, he often sat beside the incubator, recounting tales of his old canine training days in his deep, steady voice. I've seen dogs beat the odds before, he told Mike one evening as they watched River sleeping, the tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I don't know if that's true, but it can't hurt to try. Meanwhile, Mara proved to be an attentive mother to her four healthy puppies, nursing them, grooming them, and keeping them safely gathered in the kennel. The sanctuary cameras captured touching moments of maternal care. Mara gently nudging a wandering puppy back into the safety of the kennel, or patiently enduring the playful pounces of the more adventurous ones as they tested their coordination on her sturdy frame. What surprised the staff most, however, was Mara's continued interest in her absent fifth offspring. Several times a day, she would approach the fence of her enclosure, closest to where River's incubator was placed, sniffing the air and letting out soft, high-pitched whines, the same vocalization she used to call her other puppies. She knows, Wyatt insisted after witnessing this behavior. Somehow she knows River is still alive and nearby. Mike was more cautious in his interpretation. It could be that she smells our scents mingled with her puppies, or it might simply be that her maternal instinct is telling her the count is off. Regardless of the explanation, the connection between mother and separated puppy became a source of both hope and concern for the staff. If River survived, would reintroduction to the litter be possible? Would Mara accept a puppy that smelled of humans and formula rather than her own milk? And perhaps most worryingly, would the healthy puppies growing stronger every day inadvertently overwhelm their fragile sibling? These questions took on greater urgency as River reached the 2-week mark, still alive but struggling, despite the team's best efforts. The puppy wasn't gaining weight as quickly as hoped, and episodes of exhaustion had required emergency interventions twice to encourage movement. We're reaching a critical decision point, Mike told the assembled staff during their weekly meeting. River needs physical therapy and support to correct the leg issue, but it's challenging at this age and size. Alternatively, we continue as we are, knowing that tube feeding and limited mobility are stressful for the puppy, and that each day separated from the litter makes eventual reintegration more difficult. The discussion that followed was passionate but respectful, with valid points raised on both sides. Some argued for intensifying physical therapy now, citing the strain of continued tube feeding and immobility. Others advocated for waiting until River was stronger, even if that meant a longer separation from Mara and the litter. In the end, it was Sarah who offered a third perspective. What if we try partial reintroduction now, she suggested. Supervised visits with Mara and the litter while continuing the supplemental feeding and therapy. If Mara accepts River, and if the puppy shows improved well-being from the contact, it might help us decide how to pace the recovery process. The proposal carried significant risks, but it also acknowledged what many had observed, that both mother and separated puppy seemed to be experiencing distress from their continued separation. After careful consideration, the team decided to try Sarah's approach, with extensive precautions in place to ensure both River's safety and the well-being of the other puppies. The first reintroduction attempt was scheduled for early morning, when Mara was typically most calm after her night feeding. Mike, Wyatt, and Sarah would be present. Mike ready to intervene medically if necessary, Wyatt prepared to manage Mara if she became defensive, and Sarah documenting the interaction. As dawn broke over the sanctuary, casting long shadows across the rocky ground, the trio gathered outside Mara's enclosure. River, now a bit stronger but still alarmingly small compared to what a 3-week-old German Shepherd puppy should be, was cradled in a soft towel in Mike's steady hands. "Remember," he cautioned, "we abort the attempt at the first sign of rejection or distress. River's safety is paramount." With a deep breath, Wyatt unlocked the enclosure door and stepped inside. Mara, who had been watching their preparations with evident curiosity, rose from her resting place beside her sleeping puppies and approached, her movements deliberate but not threatening. "Hey, Mara," Wyatt greeted her softly. "We brought someone to see you." Mike followed, moving slowly and keeping his body language open and non-threatening. When he was about 5 feet from Mara, he carefully unwrapped the towel, exposing River to its mother's view. The moment hung suspended in time. Mara staring at the tiny puppy, her warm brown eyes steady, her posture still. The humans barely breathed, ready to retreat at the slightest sign of aggression. Then with a soft, high-pitched whine, Mara closed the distance between them. She sniffed delicately at River, her nose twitching as she processed the scent of her offspring mingled with human hands and medical supplies. For one heart-stopping moment, she opened her mouth near the fragile puppy, and Mike tensed, prepared to pull River away. But instead of aggression, what followed was a moment of such tender recognition that Sarah, filming the interaction, found tears streaming down her face. Mara gently licked River's tiny head, her warm tongue smoothing the fur that human hands had kept clean, but that lacked the scent markers of maternal grooming. River, seemingly energized by its mother's presence, let out a faint whimper, the first vocalization the staff had heard from the struggling puppy. "It's like a miracle," Sarah whispered, her voice choked with emotion. After allowing Mara to groom River for several minutes, Mike carefully placed the puppy on the soft bedding near its siblings. The four healthy puppies, now with their eyes open and much more mobile than when they were born, immediately noticed the newcomer. They approached with typical puppy curiosity, sniffing and pawing gently at their smaller sibling. Mara supervised this introduction with impressive attentiveness, gently nudging away puppies that became too rambunctious and positioning her body to create a protective barrier around River when the activity seemed overwhelming. "Look at that," Wyatt marveled. "She's not just accepting River, she's actively compensating for the size difference and fragility." The first visit lasted only 15 minutes, but its success transformed the mood at the sanctuary. Subsequent visits were extended gradually, always under careful supervision, with River returned to the incubator for rest periods and supplemental feeding. To everyone's delight, the puppy began to show marked improvement, gaining weight more consistently, displaying increased alertness, and developing stronger attempts to move its legs. By the 4-week mark, a new routine had been established. River spent mornings and evenings with Mara in the litter, receiving the socialization and comfort that only a mother and siblings could provide. Midday and overnight, the puppy returned to human care for supplemental feeding and monitoring. It wasn't ideal, but it was working. River was not just surviving, but beginning to thrive. "I think we're reaching the point where we need to make a decision about intensifying the treatment," Mike told James as they observed River playing, still awkwardly, but with increasing coordination, with a sibling during one of the supervised visits. "The leg issue isn't resolving as quickly as we'd hoped it might with growth, but River is much stronger now. The risks are lower than they were." James watched the German Shepherd family thoughtfully, his weathered face creased with both concern and pride. "What does your instinct tell you, Mike?" The veterinarian considered the question carefully. "That we're at a window of opportunity. River is strong enough now to handle more aggressive physical therapy, but still young enough that the muscles and bones can adapt fully. If we wait too much longer, we risk the condition becoming harder to correct as the body matures." "In the separation from Mara and the litter during this phase? That's my primary concern. We've seen how beneficial the family contact has been. Isolating River again, even temporarily, could be a setback emotionally, even if the treatment is physically successful." James nodded slowly. "Sometimes in nature and in medicine, there are no perfect solutions. Only best guesses made with grit and care. I trust your judgment, Mike." The intensified treatment was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, a specialist in veterinary physical rehabilitation from the Colorado State Veterinary Teaching Hospital, agreed to oversee the process at Granite, bringing her expertise and specialized equipment to minimize River's stress. The day before the intensified treatment began, the entire staff gathered for what they jokingly called Operation River's Last Supper, the final feeding and visit with Mara and the litter before the new regimen. The mood was both hopeful and anxious, with everyone acutely aware of the challenges involved in pushing such a small creature through rigorous therapy. "No pressure," Wyatt told Mike that evening as they finished the preparations for the next day. "But I think every staff member, volunteer, and regular visitor is emotionally invested in this little pup now. My mother in Pittsburgh asks for updates every time we talk." Mike smiled wryly. "No pressure at all, just the hopes and dreams of an entire sanctuary riding on a therapy plan for a 3-pound German Shepherd puppy." Treatment day dawned bright and clear, with a chorus of birdsong greeting the early arrivals at the sanctuary. By 7:30 a.m., the small clinic had been transformed into a rehabilitation space, with Dr. Sofia Rodriguez methodically arranging her equipment, splints, padding, and exercise tools, while her assistant prepared a mild sedative to ease River's transition. "We'll keep it short and focused," she assured Mike as they reviewed the puppy's progress notes one last time. 90 minutes maximum for the initial session, with constant monitoring throughout. The process itself was a testament to modern veterinary rehabilitation's capabilities. Using techniques adapted from canine physical therapy, Dr. Rodriguez meticulously applied custom splints to River's splayed legs, her hands steady and precise as she worked to support an area smaller than a child's hand. Mike, assisting with monitoring River's comfort during the session, found himself holding his breath at several critical moments, releasing it only when Dr. Rodriguez's calm voice announced, "That went precisely as planned. The splints are perfectly aligned. I'm very optimistic about mobility recovery." The post-treatment period brought new challenges. River needed to be isolated, not just from Mara and the litter, but from anything that might disrupt the delicate process of leg strengthening. No rough play, no uneven surfaces, and certainly no enthusiastic siblings overwhelming its fragile progress. Sarah, drawing on her background in educational psychology, suggested a novel approach to maintaining the mother-puppy bond during this forced separation. Using a technique similar to those employed with human preemies, too fragile for direct contact, she set up a scent exchange system. Soft cloths were placed with Mara and the healthy puppies for several hours, absorbing their scents, then carefully positioned near River's recovery enclosure. Similarly, cloths that had been in contact with River were introduced to Mara's kennel, keeping the absent puppy's scent fresh in the family's awareness. Whether due to this innovative approach or simply Mara's remarkable maternal instinct, the German Shepherd continued to show interest in her absent offspring, often lingering near the clinic building where River was recovering. Her behavior suggested an awareness that transcended mere physical proximity. The 2 weeks of recovery felt agonizingly slow to the humans involved. But finally, the day arrived when Dr. Rodriguez, examining River's leg strength, pronounced it improved enough for a cautious reintroduction to the family. "Remember," she cautioned, "no rough play, and we still need to supplement with bottle feeding for another few weeks. The progress looks good, but we want to give it every chance to strengthen before it's tested by normal puppy activities." The reintroduction was planned with the same care as the original separation, but with one significant difference. This time, the team was quietly confident of success. They had seen Mara's extraordinary adaptability and patience, her ability to modulate her behavior, and that of her other puppies to accommodate River's special needs. Their confidence was rewarded when River, still smaller than its siblings but now alert, vocal, and eager for interaction, was brought back to the enclosure. Mara greeted the puppy with the same gentle attention she had shown before. The siblings, now 7 weeks old and considerably more coordinated in their play, approached their returned littermate with what almost seemed like recognition, their usual rough-and-tumble games noticeably gentler when River was involved. "It's as if they understand," James remarked, watching the reunited family through misty eyes, "as if they know this one needs special handling." While Mike's scientific training made him cautious about attributing human-like understanding to the German Shepherd's behavior, even he had to admit that there was something remarkable about the social dynamics within Mara's unusual family. Over the following weeks, River's progress accelerated dramatically. The puppy began to stand and move more effectively, though supplemental bottle feeding continued as a precaution. Play sessions with siblings grew longer and more vigorous, with River displaying increasing coordination and strength. Most encouraging of all, movements that had been weak and tentative became steady and purposeful, clear evidence that the physical therapy had restored not just strength, but mobility. By the time the puppies reached the 3-month mark, an untrained observer would have had difficulty identifying River from its siblings. Though still slightly smaller, the once fragile puppy now bounded across the enclosure with the same exuberant energy as the others, chasing after enrichment toys, romping over low obstacles, and occasionally testing Mara's patience with typical puppy boundary pushing. "I think we can officially call this a success story," Mike told his colleagues during their regular case review meeting. All developmental milestones are being met, and the latest checks show full improvement in leg function with excellent mobility outcomes. The story of Mara and River might have remained a private triumph, known only to those directly involved, had it not been for a fortuitous connection. Sarah's cousin, a social media influencer focused on animal welfare, visited the sanctuary during River's recovery and was captivated by the unfolding drama. With James's cautious approval, he was permitted to document the German Shepherd family through posts and short videos, with strict protocols in place to minimize disturbance. The resulting viral campaign, titled Mara's Miracle, A Mother's Love in Modern Care, spread across platforms as part of a movement on animal rehabilitation successes across America. The public response was overwhelming. Viewers were moved by the combination of Mara's remarkable maternal instinct, River's fighting spirit, and the dedicated care provided by the sanctuary staff. Donations poured in, allowing Granite to expand its rehabilitation facilities and educational programs. More importantly, the story sparked conversations about the balance between rescue, intervention, and respect for an animal's innate resilience. For the staff who had lived through the intense weeks of River's struggle and recovery, the broader impact of their work was gratifying, but secondary to the daily joy of watching the German Shepherd family thrive. Each milestone, the puppy's confident exploration of new areas of the enclosure, the gradual transition from mother's milk to solid food, was celebrated as a small but significant victory. "I keep thinking about how close we came to losing this one," Wyatt remarked to Mike one evening as they completed their final checks before closing the sanctuary for the night. The German Shepherd family was curled together in a contented pile, 5 black and tan forms nestled against Mara's sleek side, their synchronized breathing visible even in the dim twilight. Mike nodded thoughtfully. "Without help, River wouldn't have made it. That's the reality of its condition. But here," he paused, watching as one of the puppies, River, he was almost certain, shifted position, stretching a paw across its mother's flank in a gesture of unconscious trust. "Here, we had the luxury of intervention," he continued, "not to override nature, but to support it through a rough patch. The resilience, the healing, the adaptation, that was all Mara and River. We just created the conditions where it could happen." Wyatt smiled, understanding the distinction his mentor was making. "Balance," he said simply. "Finding the right balance between doing too much and doing too little." "Exactly. And sometimes when we get that balance right, we're privileged to witness something extraordinary." As if in agreement, Mara opened her warm brown eyes briefly, her gaze meeting the humans before she gave a soft tail wag, that quintessential canine gesture of contentment and trust, and returned to her peaceful slumber, surrounded by the family that had defied the odds through a combination of natural resilience and compassionate intervention. In the soft evening light, with the mountain breeze whispering through the pines around them, it was impossible not to feel that they had been part of something profound. A small miracle of connection that transcended the boundaries between rescue and instinct, between human care and the animal spirit. It was a reminder of what was possible when science, compassion, and respect for animals worked in harmony, creating space for healing and growth against seemingly impossible odds. And as Mike and Wyatt quietly departed, leaving the German Shepherd family to their well-earned rest, they carried with them not just professional satisfaction, but something deeper, a renewed sense of purpose and a profound gratitude for being allowed, however briefly, to participate in the remarkable journey of Mara and her pups. If this tale of resilience and love has touched your heart, drop a comment below to share your thoughts. What moved you most about Mara and River's story? Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another journey like this one.